Hello and welcome to the Mariah Jean Fit YouTube channel. I'm Coach Mariah. Make sure you like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos as much as possible so we can reach a broader audience. We appreciate your support and enjoy the video. Hello and welcome to another vlog on YouTube and podcast on Spotify by the Fit Minds podcast. Coach Mariah here. Today, let's discuss the effects of overtraining or overreaching as far as exercise stimulus and the impacts on recovery and sleep quality are concerned. So we want to look at sleep deprivation in light of prioritizing an excess of exercise hours, eating into precious, valuable sleep and recovery time. So what does this look like? Well, it's an incredibly common issue that I see when taking on new clients. It is the overuse of exercise, replacing the very crucial hours of sleep that we require, and even including hours and hours in the gym, plus hours of cardio thereafter, or perhaps earlier in the day, maybe cumulatively adding up to 3 to 5 hours daily of exercise, and sometimes even beyond this amount in some cases. Usually I find with clients that this is a cycle that they are stuck in, which is most commonly fueled by fear, personal bias, and misinformation. Or some may have an obsession, compulsion, or addiction to exercise. So if this sounds like you, I know this is going to be a very difficult podcast to listen to, but if anything, this is going to help you break out of that cycle. I used to be a person who was in this cycle as well. Not only was I a person who drastically underate my calories, but I also very much over-exercised. So I was a person doing, an hour-long run, then I was going to the gym for 2 hours, and then I was also doing an incline walk after the gym. Back then, we weren't really counting our steps. This was about 10 years ago. It was kind of just do as much cardio as possible that you saw a lot of, especially in the fitness industry. And as a result, I saw myself go backwards with what I was actually wanting to achieve for myself. So it's not just me though. This will apply to literally the entire population as to why over-exercise can actually be impacting your goals quite dramatically. So it might look like the following. Training fasted for a weight session and getting up at 5 a.m. just to do so, even when it means that you're only getting 5 hours sleep. So let's say you might be a person who says, well, I know that getting up early can encourage me to go to the gym, and if I get it done in the morning, at least I get it done, but you're still finding your body clock is not participating. It might be that you've been doing this for weeks and for some reason you still can't get to bed on time, but you keep getting up at 5 a.m. and persisting with these 5 a.m. sessions. So I do see that some people will go to the gym in the morning, do that 5 a.m. session, and then they'll actually go back to the gym in the afternoon, or they'll do a big run in the afternoon, or vice versa. It might be a run in the morning, or it might be gym in the afternoon. But whatever it looks like, sometimes this can actually start with simply just completely dismissing the idea of getting sleep altogether and thinking that you have to get your workout in instead in the morning. It might look like doing 2 hours of weights in the morning, followed by a 2-hour run and a pump class in the afternoon, followed by another walk. It could be in a different order, but that same amount of exercise. Doing a cardio class as early as possible. I've seen this quite often, is where people get up at 4 a.m. to do a 5 a.m. cardio class. And I often ask them, do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy getting up early? Do you enjoy, going to this cardio class? Are you feeling wrecked? Are you feeling tired when you're doing this? And more often than not, the answer is, well, I do it because I think I have to. Okay, or going for a long walk or run in the morning, then doing a 2-hour weight session in the afternoon, followed by a class, more cardio such as bike, skipping, cross trainer, rower, like you name it. I've seen so many people add so much additional cardio on top of their weights for this idea that they think they need to do a combination of both in large extreme levels. So it might look like training 7 days a week without rest days and believing adamantly that if you take a rest day that you will lose muscle or gain a significant amount of body fat. This is actually quite interesting to think of as a trainer, that this is still a reality, but people still do this. People will still train 7 days a week with no rest and no recovery in this, delusion that they think that one day off is going to see them go backwards. I am currently only training 4 days a week and taking 3 rest days. So it's the first time in my life I've actually reduced my training program to 4 days. I found that my cycle is more regular with 4 days, and I also have got to a point where I don't need to grow a lot of muscle from where I am now. So It's almost fairly pointless when I'm not in a comp prep cutting down. When I'm in an off season, it's pretty pointless to constantly smash myself if I already have enough muscle to work with. So, in this case where you are maybe wanting to maintain, or, you are not necessarily wanting to gain a significant amount of muscle, you can get away with 3 or 4 sessions a week. If you are wanting to cut down, you might need to do some more sessions, but definitely not 7. And that's mostly because we want to increase your energy expenditure when you're in a calorie deficit. So the more exercise sessions, you will get a little bit extra bang for your buck in your calorie deficit. But 7 sessions a week will actually see that you have no time to recover. Just your sleep at night. And if you're not getting enough sleep, then think about it, you're not recovering at all. So missing a day of training, this is quite common, and then believing that you have to make up for it by doing a double session the following day. How many times have I got a message from a client saying, I'm going to do double tomorrow, I promise I'll do double tomorrow. And I think to myself, I've never even suggested this to a client. I have never suggested to a client that I would recommend doing a double session. In some cases, if a client is in competition prep, I will say, look, if it's something like your shoulders and your lower body, that's okay for now, but it's not something we want to do permanently because of the effect of that amount of exercise hours that we could put into a day on your body for that day. So, it might look like becoming obsessed with the idea of reaching a certain weight, okay, and then pushing yourself to train more and for longer to burn more calories because you assume that that's what it takes to lose as much weight as possible. Probably the most common reason I see or justification for over-exercising is, but if I do more, won't I get more? Won't I see more? And that's not actually the case. I'm going to tell you exactly why in this podcast, and why you will see that elite athletes, people who are really good at what they do, bodybuilders, national champions, they actually get to a point where they realize how important their recovery is for their progress, and you won't see them overtraining or overreaching, and if they do, it's something that they have to work on. So, it might look like completely trashing yourself in every single gym session. I'm talking like thrash and bash. It could be that you're going to F45 and flogging the crap out of yourself. You could be doing CrossFit every day. I know I always make special mention of F45 and CrossFit, but even in your gym sessions, it might be that you're lifting such heavy weights every single session. You're just trying to push and push and push and push. And as a result, you're feeling really sore and really tired, where you kind of become quite fatigued and you never really feel like you're getting the most out of your sessions. So it's almost like you were going really well, and then all of a sudden, every time you try and push, you just can't for some reason. It might look like that you are not recovering at all between sessions, but you refuse to change anything, sleep more and reduce the exercise stimulus or volume. So more often than not, especially with things like exercise addiction, and people don't even realize they're doing this or they have this addiction, but they are compulsed to continue the volume that they have. This 2-hour gym session, the 2.5 hours of cardio a day, basically not stopping, just moving constantly. And if they're sitting at any point, planning the next time that they're moving, I find that there is very little leeway in that they are not willing to give that up. It's almost like they refuse to believe that less can be more, and they are afraid of actually implementing those changes. But obviously, if you're feeling completely exhausted and wrecked, you're not getting to your goals and you are burnt out, you are not able to concentrate, there must be something that is your body telling you that, okay, this isn't right, something is wrong. So it can also look like believing that the current amount of calories that you are eating and exercise level that you're participating in has to be sustained in order to maintain your current body composition or fitness level. So this is the trap I fell into as a 21-year-old, where I thought that I had to keep eating 1,300 calories and that I had to keep running for 10 Ks a day and doing my 2-hour gym session and adding more and more and more onto my gym session in order to stay the way I was or to get leaner. And unfortunately, what that does is basically breathe this idea into you that, the same way you've been doing things is the only way to do it, and it's the most efficient way, right? So there isn't enough information out there from trainers, nutritionists, exercise physiologists, or certainly that we're not talking about it enough, that doing more and more and more and more, especially if you're already exercising at quite a high volume, a large number of sets a week, you're already doing a ton of cardio, adding more onto that and then trying to sustain it is not healthy, and it's not actually going to be the answer for sustaining your current results. In fact, you may end up getting things like atrophy occurring, which is literally muscle wastage, and your performance markers may drop, and you may affect your metabolic rate, or certainly the way that your heart rate responds to exercise stimulus because of this overtraining, or even in some cases overreaching over long periods of time. Now, overreaching, I did reference this earlier, you might not know what this is, but basically it's just a concept in training where, as I mentioned previously, it's smashing yourself over and over and over, not taking deloads, not sort of taking a step back from maybe a week, taking a week off training every few months. It is just the constant smashing yourself silly, not taking adequate rest days, and also can be not getting enough sleep, or not quite making it to your sleep goal. As opposed to overtraining, which overtraining is literally the very extreme version of that. So, it may look like that you're not considering the risk of atrophy, as I mentioned. So muscle wastage, when the body does not have sufficient fuel to power the exercise required. Atrophy is actually quite difficult for the body to do. To break down its own muscle tissue, you've got to really purposefully want to do that. But unfortunately, some people don't realize that this overexercise and undereating can lead to atrophy long term if you do not keep yourself in check. So it's interesting, all the stuff that you're working really hard for in the gym may actually end up being impacted because you have not thought about the impact of atrophy from the exercise stimulus, over-exercise stimulus, in conjunction with the lack thereof calories, especially in these higher heart rate zones. So, and that's the whole cardio concept, is like, when people encourage things like fasted cardio, high heart rate cardio, yes, it can work for conditioning specifically for endurance athletes, but if you have type 2 muscle fibers where you want to grow a little bit of muscle, grow some glutes, there is that risk there if you are doing fasted cardio, or if you are not eating enough calories in the total for the day, if you don't have glycogen stores, or even so if you're not focusing on just endurance training, so if you don't just want to be a runner, you will find that you will impact your muscle tissue if you're doing this over long periods of time. So if you're adding a run in every single day on top of your weights training, you may find that this will impact the results that you get with your weights training. And the run has to be pretty significant. A 5-minute run, 10-minute run, not so much, but certainly longer. Those longer durations are going to impact our energy balance mostly, and that's what we have to look at. So the amount of exercise that you're doing could quite literally have your own body chewing away at your muscle. I had atrophy, okay? There is mixed reviews with when atrophy occurs and in what conditions, but as a 21-year-old, I very clearly had atrophy. I had muscle wastage because I was dropping weight, even at a quite low body fat, and I actually lost about, I think it was around 6 kilos of lean muscle mass in the time where I was still training at the gym. I was still doing resistance training, but I was running in excess as well, and under eating. That literally is proof that, we see it quite often where women are literally over exercising and under eating, and there is a whole ton of cardio added on top of their weights training where they're doing the reverse. They're not actually getting any sort of lean muscle mass gain because there's no food available for the muscle to build, and they basically go backwards in the way of atrophy. It's not going to happen with a small amount of cardio, on top of your sessions, or, maybe a walk, etc. But it can definitely happen with this style of overtraining. So, not considering the fact that you may be binge eating because your body is trying to seek out more fuel for the exercise amount that you are doing. So I see quite often, and this is something that I also suffered with myself, where I was over exercising and I would be ravenous, and I ended up with an eating disorder. I had bulimia and I had anorexia. The bulimia was as a result of the overtraining and under-eating, because my body was pushing me to get more calories, and that was where that impulse came from, to literally binge on food to get enough to fuel that type of exercise and the amount of exercise. Now, this is where it can get dangerous, because that's where you can end up in this cycle. Over-exercise, binge eat, feel guilty, over-exercise, binge eat, feel guilty, over-exercise, binge eat, feel guilty. What if we just removed the over-exercising and just reduce that down, to a reasonable amount so you can get enough sleep, because there's sleep deprivation in there as well, right? Because I can guarantee you're not sleeping very well in this cycle. And then the binge eating becomes far less likely, or certainly something that is not going to arise as often, because you'll have less of those hunger hormones kicking in because of you flogging the shit out of yourself. So, the next point would obviously be, if you are seeing yourself using excessive bouts of exercise to compensate for going over your calories. not considering that you may have already been over-exercising, which is what's leading to the overconsumption or binging of your calories in the first place. So see what I mean? It's this vicious cycle that ends up happening. It might look like that, maybe you need to consider reducing your exercise stimulus down. This will help decrease the body's need or compulsion for additional energy in the way of food, and therefore reducing unnecessary additional stress on the body as well. Because the impacts of exercise is not that we just exercise and that's it. That actually releases cortisol. We need cortisol to exercise. It is a stressor on the body, and there is only so much of this that the body can take without adverse effects and certainly some pushback. There will be a point where your body will push back, okay? It will ask for more, certainly where food, recovery, sleep, and where recovery will be impaired. You'll have sore joints, your muscles won't be getting any better, you're gonna feel sore for days on end, etc. So, it might look like, and this is really common, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if most people are probably doing this at some stage in their life, constantly reaching for caffeine because you are probably not adequately fueling the body, or you are over-exercising and your body is not able to produce its own natural energy. So basically, you're flogging the crap out of yourself. You're not going to have energy to do anything else in your day if you are exercising for 5 to 6 hours and you are not eating enough calories or fuel. And trust me, when you are exercising that much, it is very difficult to actually physically consume that food that matches that energy output, right? So when you look at the idea of, okay, if I'm reaching for caffeine 5-6 times a day, if I'm having 5 to 6 serves of coffee a day, is that not a sign that possibly, if you're going over the recommended daily intake, that you probably need more sleep, that you need more time back in your day to sleep, because that sleep is going to be crucial for producing your own natural energy throughout the day. That's how human beings function. We actually function far better with rest and recovery, and relying on caffeine can see you get in some very sticky situations, which I'll talk about later in this vlog and podcast. So, with higher consumption of caffeine, you will see an increased risk of anxiety, visual disturbances, shaking, dehydration, and impaired sleep quality or duration. Unfortunately, over-consuming caffeine past the recommended daily amount can see that we impair our own adrenal function, okay? And as I mentioned earlier, and risk of threatening occurrences such as heart failure and even death. Yes, caffeine can kill you. There are people who die of heart attacks because they have consumed a large amount of caffeine. There's the dehydration that occurs because obviously it's a diuretic and we don't drink enough water to match the caffeine intake, but also in general, it does speed up your heart rate, or certainly get your heart rate to a point where it's not functioning as per normal. You might get some skips in heart rate as well. And this is where we see some serious issues where people are just smashing themselves with, over-exercise, drinking a ton of caffeine to compensate and not sleeping enough. And here goes that vicious cycle. So, having success with a fitness journey and physique or performance goals is more about finding the balance for energy availability and energy provision rather than overtraining or over-exercising and under-eating. And I like to use under-eating in this podcast because it's not just about overtraining and over-exercising. If we're under-fueling, if you're a person who is an elite, sprinter or an elite runner and you need to be training a lot of hours a day, and you might be an elite Olympian or something like that. I don't know if you'll be listening to this podcast, but you might be a boxer and you might need to get in that gym and certainly be training for a couple of hours a day. In that case though, you still need to adequately fuel your bouts of exercise, okay? And you still need to sleep. You're not some sort of robot that's exempt. You can't train the body to sleep for 3 hours a night because the human body still requires rest no matter which way we look at it. So, possibly not understanding the effects of overexercise also on your hydration levels amongst essential hormone production, metabolic function, etc. to achieve what's called homeostasis of the body. And basically this is its happy place. This is a place where shit starts to happen and where we feel really good and we start to, weirdly enough, we kind of look good too, We've got that nice balance. Homeostasis is usually ideal and it's going to be very different for each person, but certainly, people aren't understanding that if they're over-exercising and they're also not consuming enough water, they're over-consuming caffeine, hydration levels are going to have a huge impact on multiple things and functions in the body, because why? We are literally 70% water beings. Our bodies are made up of water. We need water. We need to be hydrated, and loss of electrolytes as well can come into that. So in sports nutrition, we refer to this principle, okay, so for recovery, basically taking care of our bodies, as the 4 R's. rehydrate, refuel or replenish, and rest and recover, okay? So the 4 R's are rehydrate, refuel or replenish, rest and recover. That is literally going to assist with so many issues that people are currently experiencing with their overtraining, their undereating, and also their lack of sleep. So, if you are paying attention to those factors and those 4 R's, you'll actually find that you're going to have a better experience of what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so why do we overtrain? Okay, I'm going to talk about that. Why do we do it? Like, what is the main cause for this? Why are people doing this? And why should we stop? It's fair enough for me to ramble at you and say, look, this is what it looks like. This is what you've been doing, or maybe a loved one has been doing, but what can you do to prevent this in future? So there may be a few personally biased reasons as to why someone might assume that more exercise equates to something that is more beneficial for you, with very little scientific evidence to prove so on paper. Where are we getting this more is more concept from? When you look at anything in life, you might be creating a project, you might be making a cake, you might be painting a picture, you might be taking a photograph, you might be writing a song. And if you look at the processes required for each of these, the rule is not more is more, It's not if I am plentiful with this particular thing, this thing I'm applying, that I'm going to get more out of it. If you write a longer song, it doesn't make it better. If you add more paint to the painting, sometimes you can ruin it, okay? If you can actually drink enough water to drown yourself. More water is not always more. If you're drinking 6 to 9 liters, sometimes some people need to drink that amount because they literally might be out doing, elite level exercise daily. And in that case, yes, that's going to be the top end of the people requiring those hydration levels. Also, tradies out in the sun, some of them do need 6 liters of water a day. But in the case of a gen population person, if you're drinking 6 to 9 liters of water and you're sit at a desk all day, more is not more in that case, okay? More is not always more. And unfortunately, people seem to think with exercise that if I just exercise more, I'll be able to achieve more from my journey. I will lose more body fat, I will gain more muscle. Couldn't be further from the truth. It is not a more is more concept, it is a enough is enough concept. And this will differ from person to person as to what that looks like, what their homeostasis looks like, what their body really is happy to work with and certainly happy to recover with. So you must ask yourself, where are you gathering this type of information from? Like, there's people who are going, I need to just thrash myself in the gym all the time, and even though I feel like crap, I still got to do it because I don't know why, but I need to, right? Where are they getting it from? An assumption, a conversation with an unqualified professional, maybe your buddy in the gym, maybe you're getting that advice from the person next to you on the treadmill. Maybe it's from your cousin, and your cousin's gone on a fitness journey and decided to give you exactly what he's doing, and as a result, now you are doing absolutely, you're wreaking havoc on your body, you're doing absolutely detrimental things to your body. Just because you are sweating and your heart rate is increased, just because you are sweating and your heart rate is increased doesn't necessarily mean that prolonged periods of exercise, or certainly swapping sleep for additional exercise bouts, will do anything overly beneficial for you other than fatigue your sympathetic nervous system and see you plateau. Now, this is not always the case. Sometimes, yes, a little bit of additional exercise stimulus is required, but when you're looking at 3 to 5 to 6 hours of exercise cumulatively daily, and you think that that's going to help you, watch what happens to your body, to your mind, to your hunger levels after you do this type of stuff. It's not going to work and match to your nutrition, especially because you need to match the calories of that output that you're doing in order to see that your body, or certainly not as much of a deficit that you might be doing with less exercise, because your body will push back. So, you may not fully understand why more is not always more, and that's understandable. People really don't get energy balance, and I explain it in my podcast as much as possible so that eventually you do. So if you're listening to this podcast for the first time, listen to any other podcasts I've done on energy availability and on things like hormone function, etc., because I will make special mention of energy balance in there, talking about calorie deficits and the like, but how we do not work in extremes ever with nutrition and exercise stimulus. It is not required and not necessary. Taking into consideration, there is a larger influence, and I've said this before, of our total dietary calories that they have on our results, okay? The biggest contributing factor is what you put in your damn mouth. Not from a perspective of total daily energy expenditure, how much energy you expend that's how much energy you expend, but you can make more of an impact with your food, okay? That's one thing we need to understand, is that if you want to lose body fat, one of the best things you can do, instead of training for hours and hours and doing tons of cardio, the amount of cardio that you might need to burn off a chocolate bar is going to be about an hour or so. If you could just work on your food a little bit and a little bit more calorie control, have the chocolate bar, but maybe have, controlled amounts of things so that you know what you're eating daily, then you don't have to constantly compensate with exercise. So specifically, more exercise and less sleep, okay, and less food is not the answer to achieving more from your training and nutrition goals. As well as the benefits of adequate sleep in favor of the extra and somewhat unnecessary hours you may be putting into the gym in sacrifice of your sleep, okay? So these are all the things we need to think about in this process, why we do it and why we should stop. We see with the lack of sleep, below the line of adequate sleep requirements for recovery, there is a huge impact on recovery, fat burning capabilities, responses to insulin, and muscle repair or growth. There are going to be a multitude of other problems where we're going to see an impact on mental health, impact on happy hormones as well, and other types of hormones that we actually need for literally our daily function, our brain function, our skin quality. Like, it's going to impact more than one facet of your life, and certainly more than one facet of your training and your performance and the results that you see. So obviously this can outweigh any real plausible benefit to the additional exercise, okay? Obviously it's going to eat into the hours of sleep anyway. Basically, this excessive exercise stimulus can be relatively obsolete. If you are finding that you're not getting enough sleep and you've got not enough hours in the day, but you're also exercising for 3 to 5 hours daily, it might be logical to taper that back. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in the podcast. If you find currently your exercise hours are eating into your sleep schedule to the point where you may only be getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep daily or even 7 hours consistently, you will need to reassess your schedule, your exercise frequency and duration, and certainly the impacts of potential over-exercise or at least overreaching. This can often lead us to feeling incredibly exhausted, and this is a very good reason, okay? So your body requires 7 to 9 hours of sleep in total. This will differ from person to person and from male to female. In order to function, achieve optimal performance and strength levels, and to optimize fat burning and muscle growth and repair, it is no coincidence that you hear some of the best coaches in the industry repeating themselves with this, and that there are going to be a lot of coaches who will not reference this, who will not talk about it, and who will continue to flog you harder and blame you for the reason why you're not achieving results. So often the elephant in the room, and I say this all the time, is because there are so many of these, there are so many very obvious answers when it comes to coaching, is going to be that there is an exercise stimulus that is just too intense, too much for what you're trying to do, and certainly that more is not more. We release a hormone called human growth hormone, so HGH, in our sleep, and this is basically what's responsible for allowing our muscle to repair and grow at adequate levels. It's also the hormone that is released when women are pregnant to grow their baby. So it's an incredible hormone and the powers that it holds. So it's released in our sleep, and we find that we can release the most amount of this hormone to grow and repair muscle up to a certain point where our body is satisfied with the amount of sleep hours, okay? So the less we sleep, the less of this human growth hormone that we're actually getting. And also, repair of muscle only occurs while you sleep. So people think that they grow muscle while they're training. No, it's while you sleep. That is where the magic happens. So if you see big jack people, or even women with plenty of muscle, myself, I sleep 8 to 9 hours a day. And if I don't, if I get 7, I will know about it. I will feel it, especially with the type of exercise stimulus. If it is heavy weights, if it is intense training, you're gonna need more sleep than the average person. So you would find that, obviously, if you were to reduce your exercise stimulus down to, say, at most maybe 2 hours daily, plus maybe a moderate pace walk on top of your weights training, if you are a sedentary person, to get to your steps, that you'll have a much better time with this experience, that you're going to feel 10 times better, that you are going to not feel as on edge all the time. You're going to have better quality sleep. you will find that you'll be able to give more time back to your sleep as well, because you're buying back that time. And as a result, you'll be able to control things better, like hunger hormones such as ghrelin, have a better response to insulin, so you're preventing insulin resistance, which is a serious issue that we find with literally sleep deprivation being one of the major causes for insulin resistance, and allow for adequate recovery and growth of muscle tissue. Another consideration needs to be paid for rest days, okay? So I go on about sleep deprivation and over-exercising, but what about actually, factoring in the right amount of rest days? If you look at any of the top competing bodybuilders or even athletes in the world, they take frequent days off training. If it's, at minimum once a week, it can be 2 to 3 times a week that they don't train or exercise, and they will even take full weeks off training or deload weeks as frequently as required. It might be every few months, in order to see them progress and certainly get past injuries and niggles, and certainly that cumulative stress on the body that can occur. And this is to give your body a chance to repair. Your body doesn't do very well repairing if you're constantly smashing it with stress stimulus. So, either way though, there will be very few instances where you will see an elite athlete training 7 days a week and achieving success in their progression in their physical or performance endeavors. The major reason it is important to take at least 1 full day of training is literally because your body requires that time to recover from that cumulative fatigue and stress. You do require time off exercise stimulus, 24 hours at least, and sometimes even breaking up those days across the week if you're going to have numerous rest days. So this is due to the fact that we need to reduce cortisol levels down to a reasonable amount for our body to repair and to recover, okay? So adequate rest and recovery time away from exercise also helps with releasing more consistent levels of those happy hormones that we need. So we do get a release after exercise, but if we've got a ton of stress hormone being released, cortisol, into the body, it makes it very difficult for those happy hormones to actually basically find their way into our brains. So if you have tons of cortisol and you're trying to produce serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, you will find there's going to be this huge imbalance there, and there is a point where exercise stimulus will actually induce a very high level of cortisol in the body, and basically where you can't come down from that. So we need these hormones such as serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, and dopamine at a sustainable and healthy level. Sometimes if you're thinking after exercise you're not feeling that endorphin rush, this could really mean that it's because of this cumulative stress that you're experiencing, whereby you are not actually getting that positive release that you usually do. So it's mostly also due to the fact that our adrenal function is not overstimulated, okay, when we are adequately resting. So adrenal function is basically something that is required. We need that adrenaline in order for us to exercise. But in that as well, too much of that, literally putting our adrenal function into overdrive, will see us basically have some pretty nasty side effects. And that will include lots of things like lack of sleep, anxiety, depressive episodes, as I mentioned, trouble with getting your moods up as well, and experiencing happiness even. So it's really interesting, but there is so much thing as too much of exercise. There really is. So we also see a risk in chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, obesity, hormone balance issues, and uncontrollable binge eating episodes as a result of sleep deprivation, and not getting enough sleep. So, adequate sleep is so important for preventing these issues. And, diabetes isn't just magically caused by sleep deprivation. It's through things like insulin resistance, which then causes people to not be able to recognize the food they're eating as natural energy available. And that way you'll basically be going through the day just feeling flat as shit and wanting to eat more food anyway. So that's where we start to see things like increased risk of diabetes and obesity, because you're not actually giving your body a chance to get to that natural energy restoration from sleep, and then have that normal adrenal function throughout the day and have that normal response to insulin, that food you consume as energy. And so that spike in hunger hormone that we achieve from sleep deprivation is pretty nasty. And you'll find that for some people, they end up, unfortunately, eating over their calories as a result of this constant sleep deprivation. So with overexercise, we see issues with adrenal function, impacting the sympathetic nervous system, and in turn, performance. That nervous system, the impact on the sympathetic nervous system kind of feels like you've been hit by a truck. It really feels like your spine is kind of a bit sensitive. You just feel shook. It's not back pain, but it's going to be that your body starts to overheat as well. That is really showing you that, hey, this is too much stress. This is too much for me. You will know it. Actually, it weirdly feels like you're starting to get a fever, but you're not sick. So in turn, it affects your performance, your metabolic responses, your metabolic rate, okay? So basically your body will compensate. It will actually get to a point where if you don't have enough energy and enough recovery in order to, fuel the type of exercise that you're doing, you will get into a position where your heart rate will compensate. It will slow down. It will, get you to a point where you feel like you're in slow motion. It's going to affect your fat burning capabilities, muscle gain capabilities, as I mentioned, because of that, human growth hormone we experience through sleep. Fat burning as well, because we actually do burn fat in our sleep, interestingly enough, and even an impact on physical composition as well as mental health. Okay, so we actually look worse when we're sleep deprived. We look watery. We look like we've got fluid all over the place, because literally inflammation is going to be more common when we see sleep deprivation, as well as obviously, as I mentioned, mental health. We are going to see, and everyone's experienced this, when you're sleep deprived and you've been flogging the shit out of yourself, are you a happy person? Not particularly. Usually you're cranky, you're short with people, you're irritable, and there's no coincidence. Again, we can see binge eating patterns and cycles can quickly arise with this overexercise. So I'm kind of splitting sleep deprivation from overexercise and explaining the two different components separately. But we see the binge eating cycle patterns in either, from either reason. So if you're just over-exercising, you're still getting enough sleep, or you're not getting enough sleep, and that alone, or if you're doing both of them together, this is why you're probably experiencing a lot of these symptoms and issues. So with the over-exercise, you've got these binge eating patterns that also occur with sleep, and then there can be this vicious cycle if it's one by itself. So if you're just not getting enough sleep, or if you're just over-exercising, or if you're doing both, that's where we can see a really, really strong turn towards these types of behaviors, and people don't even realize that that's why it's happening. So usually you can tell if you have nervous system fatigue. As I mentioned, this will present in ways of reduced exercise capacity or strength, reduced heart rate capabilities, metabolic adaptation to dieting, etc., etc. It's going to look like delayed recovery and excessive soreness for weeks on end, lethargy and tiredness, even sometimes despite sleeping adequate hours. So this adrenal fatigue and sympathetic nervous system fatigue is going to look like, or certainly feel like, continuously feeling wrecked, even with 8 to 9 hours. And this could be because of overreaching, overtraining, not taking enough rest days, and basically just burning yourself out. Sometimes this can also present in the way of shaking, okay? So like you can get to a point where you start to shake, and that can sometimes be in conjunction with the overconsumption of caffeine, or being more jittery than usual, making easy mistakes, injuring yourself more frequently, or certainly the same injuries arising over and over despite addressing them, stretching, getting massage, etc. So to finish up, what can we do? What are the recommendations and guidelines? I've talked about what it looks like. I've talked about why we need to stop doing it, why we do it. But what can we do? What's the solution moving forward? Because I think that a lot of people get down to that nitty-gritty and the specifics and go, well, hold on, how much exercise is too much exercise, and what do I need to do with my sleep to fix it? So as I mentioned earlier, 7 to 9 hours of sleep, is ideal. That kind of nice little window there. 7 to 8 for men. Sometimes it's 8 to 9 for men, especially if they're exercising quite frequently. 8 to 9 for women. It's a lot of sleep. And if you're not currently getting this amount of sleep, if you're kind of on the edge of that and you're still feeling a little bit shitty every single day, it's probably because your body needs that little bit extra sleep. The more intense and more frequent the exercise bouts come about, if you're doing more of these workouts, if you're training for 6 days a week and you're in the gym for 1 to 2 hours, it might look like needing more sleep than the average person. I did say this earlier, but I need to reiterate that, is that it can be very different for people who have athletic endeavors. They are maybe bodybuilders that are training quite intensively. Most of the population is probably not training 5 to 6 days a week for 1 to 2 hours. So this is whereby we see that sometimes we actually require more recovery, and we shouldn't feel bad about that. So try to slowly taper down your current overtraining schedule. Perhaps you could reduce your training program to 5 days from 6, or even 7 days to 6, okay? Because as I mentioned, if you're not currently having a rest day, that has got to change. That has to change. I'm not going to have an argument with you. And even if you believe, wholeheartedly that you need to have 7 days of training and that you personally just need to train every day, maybe just go for a walk on that 7th day to convince yourself you've done something. But other than that, I can guarantee you do not require those 7 days. And in fact, it's working against you. You can also look at reducing the length of the time of your program might take you to complete. So if you're doing a 3-hour weight session, maybe you need to reduce the sets and reps, or certainly just reduce those the exercise volume. So you might be doing 10, 11, 12 exercises. Maybe you need to just pull that down to 6 to 8 and be more effective with the exercises that you're doing. So perhaps reducing, basically the larger volume of the week could be looking like compacting it down. Maybe you're not squatting 6 times a week, maybe you're just squatting once or twice a week, and being, as I said, more effective and more purposeful in those workouts. Reducing the additional cardio output to the extent where you are only necessarily achieving a particular step goal, maybe daily, and not surpassing this, not thinking that you have to just keep doing tens of thousands of steps over your step goal to achieve more, okay? Ceasing exercise when you realize that you're probably going to be eating into your sleep time and you need to go home and go to sleep. Treating your sleep as if it is a higher priority than your exercise. Your sleep is more important than your exercise. I know it's crazy, but it is. It just is. There are a lot of trainers out there who are going to argue with me and say, oh no, exercise is king. If you don't sleep, you die, Really, that's the whole point. Sleep deprivation has crazy effects. If you want to actually research this, have a look at the effects of sleep deprivation, prolonged sleep deprivation on people, and what it does to the mind is frightening. It's really, really scary. And certainly, obviously, then what it does to your body in turn. If it's doing that to your mind, imagine what it's doing to your body. So it might look like allowing yourself to miss a day of training, okay? It's okay to do that every now and then if you need to, or if you just don't have the time in your day for that session, it is okay. Forgive yourself. Start again tomorrow. Take a rest day when you're feeling completely wrecked or exhausted, and look at taking deload weeks when you're due for maybe your period, or potentially every 8 to 12 weeks as you start to feel like your recovery or your strength is lagging. And trust me, you will come back better. You always do, you just don't give yourself enough of a chance to do that. 1 week of a deload, or certainly even a 1 week of training, is not going to see you lose your gains. I do it all the time, and I actually get stronger. And I see this with my clients as well. They come back stronger and better. It's common practice, especially in bodybuilding, but also even in general with literally elite athletes. You're just not researching this enough, and you're kind of making these assumptions that you need to thrash and bash all the time. So ensure that you are not utilizing drastic dieting methods and that you are engaging in a calorie deficit, okay, that is tailored to you, and not simply starving yourself to the point of no return and being ravenous and then basically binge eating anyway. So this would drive you to binge. The appropriate calorie deficit would see that you still have enough energy to complete your workouts, okay, and that you are not completely starving after finishing an exercise session, because also you're not over-exercising to that extent either. If you're not doing 3, 4, 5-hour sessions and then trying to eat next to nothing, if you're eating, just enough to put you into a calorie deficit and exercising just a little bit more into that, but not so much that you're flogging the crap out of yourself, and you sleep adequately, oh my goodness, you actually start to feel and experience what it's like to achieve the results you want to in a relative way, in a way that is sustainable and in a way that doesn't make you feel like absolute shit. So, if you impulsively overconsume your calorie deficit consistently, if you are that person who is just literally cannot stick to their calorie deficit because they're constantly hungry, and so hungry it's uncontrollable, it may be something to consider that your calories may be too low. You may be exercising too much, and you might need to take your calories slightly up or taper your exercise time and frequency slightly down to allow your body to tolerate the correct calorie deficit and energy balance for your own metabolic rate. And it is different from person to person. I'm so sorry to tell you that, but it is very individualistic. It is about balance, not about extremes, and it is not about a blanket rule for every single person. Not every single person needs to eat 1,200 calories, 1,300 calories, flog themselves on the treadmill and, train for 3 hours in the gym. In fact, nobody needs to do that. It's just not necessary. It is not necessary. It is really awful for you. So, you will often find when you take extreme measures, you will get extreme swings, okay? So it's like if you are using these really extreme measures and they feel awful, you're probably going to experience the downsides to that, okay? So you'll find that you'll swing from one end to the other of complete exhaustion, lethargy, and hunger. And then obviously you'll go, all the way to the other end as well, to then binge eating to make up for that. So this is where we see this natural progression, and it needs to stop. It starts with you. You are the person who can decide to take a step back, And trust me, I know how scary it is to do that, but do it in small amounts and slowly take yourself away from, pull yourself away from that crazy over-exercise and under-eating process. And it might not be under-eating. It might just be over-exercise and sleep deprivation, but certainly you will see that sometimes they go hand in hand. You will often find that it's a gradual and effective process, okay, that you need to take. And it's not sustainable to have something that is not gradual and is not effective. So if you are having to take really extreme measures and you feel awful, could you probably assume that this is not something that you could do long term to achieve a goal, and that it has to change eventually? Your body is not designed to feel awful all the time, and it shouldn't have to. So you could taper down your caffeine intake to the recommended daily amount, and try not to consume caffeine any closer than 8 hours before bed, which will help a lot with your sleep quality. If your body is getting too tired towards the end of the day, this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's getting ready to sleep. Let it get tired. If you feel like you need something before a workout, maybe look at a non-stim pre-workout, which can help with small little boosts of energy provision, but you're not going to then have that, keep me up at night type of effect. So that type of cycle as well with extreme measures can see that you'll engage in periods of self-sabotage and not even realize you're doing it if you do not action the change towards a more sustainable approach. And I think certainly that people who tend to do this over-exercise, sleep deprivation, under-eating, they work in extremes anyway. Everything does seem to be very black and white, and it should be encouraged to understand that there is grey area and that it is this balance. It's the whole point of going on a health journey. It is about balance. And certainly once you've reached your goal, you can increase your food. You can also look at decreasing exercise stimulus just a touch, so that you then aren't finding that you are trying to sustain something that is just too stressful for your body. Once you start sleeping the adequate hours required for recovery, correctly rehydrating your body and allowing for the repair of the muscles, you will start to experience a significant shift and change in your daily energy levels, okay? Your moods, your concentration, and your hunger levels is all going to work in your favor. You're no longer going to feel like you want to eat your left arm, as long as you're eating enough calories. You're going to feel like you have more concentration, more energy for your family. You're going to be able to work better. You're going to have a better time with your career and how you actually feel mentally as well. Try to time your workout, where you have natural energy in the day, or possibly after you've had the caffeine for the morning. So if you feel like it has to be mid-morning, that's okay. If you're okay getting up early in the morning, that is still fine, as long as you're getting enough sleep to that point, and you have that coffee. If you like to train at lunchtime, that's totally fine as well. You can also use, the non-stim pre-workout. I wouldn't look at fat burners, but I would look at things that basically they're called pump products, but you can get a specific, literally you can Google it, non-stim pre-workout. Just make sure there's no caffeine or sometimes taurine in there, because they can often have that kind of stimulant effect. And weirdly enough, even natural caffeine can do that too. Once you start, and natural caffeine being green tea, extract and that type of thing, it's still caffeine. Any type of caffeine is still caffeine. Once you start resting and recovering and really putting this together as a bigger picture, you'll find that you'll have a better experience with the way that your body feels. You'll start to understand the benefits in direct correlation with your performance. You will see the physical changes of your physique. A relaxed and calm body is going to give back to you, I assure you. There is a point where we become lazy and complacent, and that's if we sit on the couch all day for days on end, and we just kind of binge eat and don't give a shit about what we're doing. But there is also another version of rest and recovery, which actually looks like very purposeful and very tactful rest and recovery, and that is actually important for you to sustain along with your exercise, your dieting, and the stimulus that you keep applying. You actually need the highs, and you need the very moderate restful lows in order to balance your entire lifestyle and the way your body functions in your favor. So to end the podcast, take a leaf out of a booklet of elite athletes and international, national bodybuilding and sporting champions. Rest is essential, recovery is imperative, and more is not always more. Okay, thanks a lot for listening to the vlog and podcast. Looking forward to doing another one for you soon. Thanks. Bye.